This podcast may contain adult language and themes. Listener discretion is advised. But yeah, so yeah, how are you doing, Emily?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, How are you?
I'm alright. I'm okay. The weather's pretty nice. Starting to get warmer outside. Like, how about you? Because part of the reason I wanted to, a big part of the reason I wanted to talk to you was because you were living in Ishikawa during the Noto Earthquake of 2024.
Yeah, I was, and it's really funny because not like haha funny, but it's really funny because I'm farther from Noto than, let's say, Kanazawa, like the big city of Kanazawa, and Kanazawa had barely any shaking, anything. But
Really?
because of geology, yeah, like they had shaking, and there's like some cracks in the walls and such, but for the most part, Kanazawa did not have very many issues, and like Nonoichi, which
Mm-hmm.
is next to Kanazawa too, had like almost zero issues.
Okay.
And then like 10 miles or so up the road from Kanazawa is a place called Uchinada.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just liquefaction, roads had buckled, walls
Mm.
collapsed. And then I'm south, and I had not quite as bad as Uchinada, but similar damage where I was
Okay. I'm
because
sorry to
of the
hear that.
geology.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, like I used to live in Toyama and I visited Ishikawa City from time to time with friends. Is that the capital? Wait a second. No,
Yeah,
Kanazawa City.
Kanazawa.
Is Kanazawa the capital of Ishikawa?
Yeah, so
Okay.
Kanazawa is the capital and like the big city. And kind of a side note, the license plates, so the number plates.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in Kanazawa, your number plate says Kanazawa on it. And if you live in any other part of Ishikawa, it's just Ishikawa. And my ex, who will never listen to this, don't worry, he's never gonna listen. He English, he's scared of it.
Mm-hmm.
He was so jealous for the longest time of my Kanazawa plates because Kanazawa is so cool, and the rest is just the Inaka.
Uh-huh.
It's just like,
Right.
dude. Yeah. Sorry, side note there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Kanazawa is the capital and where most of the people live. And then there's Komatsu, which is south of that, which is where the airport is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All
And
right.
the self-defense people.
Right. Yeah. So, that's a little bit of just background on the general area. Yeah. So, Ishikawa was sort of the center of the universe in
Yeah.
Ishikawa anyway. And they didn't get it as bad, so that's good. So, without revealing your own location, like, did you get hit hard by the earthquake?
So my part of my city was 5+, Shindo 5+.
Mm-hmm. What's Shindo?
That's the Japanese scale of shaking.
Right.
So I think Kanazawa may have been 4, which
Mm-hmm.
is a lower degree of shaking. And so mine was 5+, and I'm on the 5th floor of the building. So there's I wasn't in my building for the initial earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting in a coffee shop drinking coffee. But the aftershocks, even, things were shaking and falling around in my apartment for
Oh wow.
weeks after.
For
The
for weeks
initial earth
after.
For weeks. Oh yeah, the aftershocks. Even the Japan Meteorological Agency, which is in charge of earthquake reporting, was confused. They're like, it should only be a week, and it went on for like over a month.
Wow.
Yeah, where I would be woken up Now I'm a couple hours from the epicenter, but the next town over felt nothing.
Oh wow.
And this actually prompted me to look at maps of the old Google Earth shots from before they reformed the apartment building that I live in. And what
Hmm.
I noticed was there's a wide variety of rocks in the general Hokuriku in general region because of the way
Right.
that the plates kind of came together. Yeah.
Right.
So there's different types of rocks layered on top of each other.
Hmm.
And then in the night, I think it was the 1940s, there was a huge earthquake in Fukui Prefecture. I found the fault line maps, and I'm
Hmm.
literally just on the north side of that fault line. And anything south of that
Uh,
fault line felt like nothing.
hmm.
The knowledge was kind of horrifying at the same time because I realized that my apartment is basically built on a reclaimed field,
Hmm.
and the remaining field that they didn't build anything on completely liquefied during the big earthquake on New Year's. Um,
I've never heard
yeah,
of anything like that before. Holy
yeah,
shit. And I've lived in Japan for a long time and I've experienced a lot of earthquakes and usually they're, just little tremors. I've experienced aftershocks as well, but certainly never for like weeks after and certainly nothing like
yeah,
liquefaction of the like I don't even know. I don't even know what to make of that.
yeah. I've been in Japan for a while now, and I've felt a couple earthquakes, but nothing this big.
Mhm.
And like, I've never seen Japanese people panic over the earthquake alarm.
Right.
Like, sitting in the coffee shop when the initial earthquake happened, people were panicked. Like,
Right.
usually everyone just ignores it, right? And
Yeah.
it was like being on a boat.
Yeah, so even out here, like I'm super far from Ishikawa, but like even out here, every time I've experienced an earthquake before, like I don't know how to explain what an earthquake feels like, but I don't know. Like imagine you're lying in bed and somebody starts jumping on the bed. That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
earth is just moving around underneath you and your body is moving around in response to that without your volition, which is a very strange feeling. But like when this earthquake happened, and again, I was nowhere near the epicenter. I felt like I was at sea. It was so bizarre. The earth was it was swaying and I don't know how to explain it. And even if you have experienced an earthquake, that might that might leave you with a question mark over your head. Like, what do you mean by swaying? It felt like the earth was liquid. It was weird.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. It was really weird, and I did not like it.
Right.
It's just it was not a fun experience. So I was able to get home, but it was probably like 2 hours after the initial earthquake because I just kinda, like, I sat in the coffee shop because I was like, "I don't know what to do."
Hmm.
Like, I don't know, am I, like, should I go back to my apartment? I don't know if my apartment's okay.
Hmm.
Really bad. I don't turn off my gas every single time I leave my apartment. By
Hmm.
now, has my apartment now exploded? I don't know. There's all these sirens going off. Um, and then my work started calling me.
Hmm.
It was New Year's, right? So everything's closed as far as non-service type businesses. So
Right.
like not restaurants, but I mean, I work in schools, right? So the schools are closed for winter vacation. And my
Hmm.
bosses start calling me or people from the company. And they're like, "Well, where are you?" It's like, "Well, I'm at such and such a place." And they're like, "Well, there's a tsunami warning. Like you
Hmm.
have to go to the shelter. Is your apartment okay?" And it's like, "Well, I'm not at my apartment, so I don't know if my apartment's okay. And there's a tsunami warning for the area, but we're nowhere near the ocean." And
Hmm.
by we're nowhere near the ocean, I know like tsunamis can still come in, but the area where I am, there's a small mountain between the ocean and the inland.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's cliffs right on the coast, and then there's an actual mountain. So to get hit by a tsunami,
Right.
that tsunami would be massive, like Hollywood thriller or adventure movie size tsunamis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then they're like, we need to talk to the staff at the coffee shop. So I give this, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Here, talk to my company. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, no, there's no problem. She doesn't have to go to evacuation center or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually I went home and
Wait,
some
did your
things had
company,
broken.
like, you were on the phone with your company and they were like, let us talk to the coffee shop
Yeah.
staff?
Yeah, like they wouldn't believe me. And I'm just like, look at a map. like
Okay.
it's really, the tsunami warnings had been issued for, like, let's just say they were issued for in Ishikawa, many places, but like Nomi City.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nomi City goes from the ocean all the way to the mountains. It's massive.
Right.
And so like in where I live as well, the cities themselves, the towns are huge.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of people, but the actual land is huge. So you could be 25, 30 kilometers from the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And the tsunami warning is for that city, but only for certain districts
Mm.
in that city.
Right,
And
right.
so my company was just hearing the prefecture and the city. So it was nice that they were concerned, but at the same time, it was kind of frustrating that they weren't listening to what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And my company, we have people who are in Noto, who
Mm-hmm.
were in Shiga, Nakanoto, all those areas. It's like, maybe you should be contacting them and
Mm-hmm.
and not me right now. Um, yeah.
Right. So they were freaking out a little bit. Like, this is one of those cases where these types of companies are like doing the right thing for their employees. So or their contractors,
Yeah.
if you want to get specific. But yeah, so like I do understand getting freaked out because like I forget what number the earthquake on the Japanese earthquake scale it was, but it was significant. And like I can only imagine people were sitting there thinking about another March 11th. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it was a Shindo 7,
Right.
which I think is the highest the scale
Right.
goes. Which that earthquake I was talking about before, the Fukui City earthquake, is the reason the scale goes up to 7 now.
Mm.
After that earthquake, they raised the scale because it was that powerful.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so the Shindo scale measures the shaking, and then there's the magnitude scale that is used in the US that I'm more familiar
Mm.
with. And then there's another scale that measures some kind of energy released, and this was very close to the March 11th earthquake as far as that
Mm.
scale. And I forget the name of it, but in some of the reading I was doing, it was very close to
Mm.
that. I mean, relatively speaking,
Right.
these scales are massive. So the area has less people than I think the March 11th earthquake has.
Right. So you mean the affected area in Ishikawa?
Yeah, it's kind of tough because there's not a lot of roads up there.
Right.
I've been up there a bunch of times before this. There's not a lot of roads. And the roads that are there, they're either, narrow through the mountain or narrow right along the coast.
Mm.
There's only one or two like largish roads in and out of the town.
Right.
The way Noto is, it's all mountains and coast. And so even the same town, the different neighborhoods in the town are all separated.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is a huge challenge to if they plan on repairing any of the damage. But
Also, just
even just
like yeah, it's
responding,
responding, evacuations. Yeah, like
yeah,
if you're from a rural area, you might understand what it means to have a narrow road. Like if you're from a more city or urban area, you might think like a 2 lane road is narrow. Like no, like if you can fit,
Oh yeah, no, no,
like
no,
you might
yeah.
be thinking like, oh, you can only fit two SUVs on this road. That's really small. Like you wouldn't be able to fit one SUV on a country road in Japan. Like especially if it's like further away from the commercial centers. The further away from downtown you get, like it feels like the less um resources and the less frequently resources are spent on doing things like road work. Like they'll maintain the roads, they won't like increase the size of the roads because they're kind of like, well, why bother, you know? So these roads, like I'm
Yeah.
imagining what an evacuation might look like under those conditions, and yeah, it's you know, kind of frightening.
A lot of these roads are the kinds where, except for like the main road. So the main road is usually one lane in each direction. Sometimes two. There's the Noto. I forget the name of the road, but it's basically the main road you would take up into Noto to go to the big aquarium. There's the Notojima Aquarium,
Mm,
and then to go to the Wajima Morning Market. I think you could also take that road.
mm,
But other than that road, everything either one lane in each direction or one lane,
mm.
meaning you either pull off to the side and the other car kind of squeezes past you, or my personal favorite, one car's got to drive backwards so you get to a point that you can do that.
Right,
having having had to do that, yeah.
right. Yeah. So yeah, it's got to be tough. And like people up there are used to, I mean, like people around Japan are used to earthquakes. You get an earthquake, probably. You know, this is not hyperbole. Like there's probably one earthquake in Japan every day, at least. Like extremely minor
Yeah.
earthquakes,
Oh yeah.
but you know, there's probably an earthquake every day somewhere. And you get used to earthquakes even if you can feel it. Most of the time you can't feel them, but yeah, you'll get a little shake and you'll kind of like you'll get a little still and you'll be more alert for like, you know, a good 30 seconds. And you'll be like, okay, is this gonna go away? Is this gonna go away? Okay, it's gone. Right? Um and you're like, okay, that was just a normal earthquake. It's just life in Japan. But on January 1st, oh yeah, that was, you know, it lasted for a while.
Oh
And
yeah.
the nature of it, again, that swaying, I did feel nauseous. I was like, this is the weirdest earthquake ever. And then, and it wasn't only that, like, I thought it was just a weird earthquake. And then I heard that it originated in Ishikawa. And I was like, that is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so there was all sorts of videos coming out on social media. There was they interrupted TV programs to broadcast news and alerts and warnings and instructions and things like that. And it was an intense day. And like I don't live there, but like it was, I think around the country it was an intense day. I
Yeah.
think we get that.
It was.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No. It was crazy. It was very
Hmm.
intense.
Right.
And then the other New Year's Day, which, as you know, everything's closed. So
Hmm.
I got back to my apartment, and the outside, not inside my apartment, but outside of my apartment, smelled like gas. And I couldn't really see much, but I could see that there was damage and that there was running water, and it looked weird.
Right.
The next day, I go out, and so Tuesday, and one of the apartment management people were here from the local apartment management, and he's standing behind my building. There's two buildings, and the gas smell is really strong. And he's taking some pictures, and he's like, "Oh, it's fine. This isn't no problem, no problem." I'm like, "There's a gas smell."
Right.
The next day, we had another big aftershock. And when I went out, the gas smell was even stronger.
Mm.
So, being the curious person that I am, I followed my nose to where the gas leak was,
Mm-hmm.
which was coming from a separate small unused building on the property. There's like a kitchen in there, and I guess they use it for meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when you're at the gas station and you fill your car and you can kind of see the fumes coming out of the gas tank sometimes?
Right, the air gets wavy. Yeah.
Yeah, you could see that coming out of the side of this building where the pipe goes in.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the same building that all the ground had cracked and water was running from that building's direction to the foundation of my apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried calling the gas company, right? And I basically got a message saying that they were closed
Huh.
and to call back on a day that they were
It's
open.
kind of a day to stay open. This is the day to send people
Yeah,
over to
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
office. Holy shit. Yeah.
So this is January 3rd, okay?
Mm-hmm.
January 3rd. So I call the apartment building company. Same kind of message. Oh, closed for the holiday. Call back when we're open.
This is on the
So
3rd?
I take my
Because, like,
butt
yeah,
to,
that's a couple days
yeah, this is on
after
the
the whole
3rd.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now the gas has been leaking since the earthquake, okay? And so has the water.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to the local police station.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's very interesting is around my apartment complex, the actual apartment complex has all this broken pavement, concrete. I mean, the flat parking lot, one part of it was now up to my knee, and all sand and water had come out of it. There was all sorts of damage. Um, the foundation, the soil had dropped, stairs had broken going into the buildings. It was pretty bad. I mean, I posted some of the pictures on Twitter. I don't know if you saw them, but
Mm-hmm.
I was freaking out on Twitter, or X as we now call it, and go to the police station. There's no damage by the police station.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in and they're like not believing me. And the one guy goes up to his boss, and this kind of upset me because he's like, "Oh, well, it's just a foreigner complaining about the earthquake. They don't know what they're talking about." And he's saying this in Japanese, and I said to him, I was like, "My nationality has nothing to do with whether or not I smell gas."
Mm-hmm.
Like, so eventually I convinced the police department to come out to the apartment. It took a little bit of like, no, seriously, you guys need to see this. There's a gas leak.
Mm-hmm.
So they come, and they had already called the fire department. And the police officer opens up his car door, takes one whiff of the air, and is like, "This is
Yeah.
dangerous." And he's looking at the ground and all the
Yeah.
damage. And he's like, "What? This is very
Right.
dangerous."
So there's
And
some
they
people that will, I mean, like there's always some people, like anytime a woman or a minority is talking, there's some people that will have a reaction. So obviously, not all, not all men, I don't know, like not all
Yeah,
Japanese people,
not all.
but,
Let's just be very
right.
clear.
So,
Yeah,
your experience with the Japanese police might be rosy and peachy and fine. But there absolutely are people that will dismiss whatever you have to say because you're not Japanese. Also, I mean, if you talk to enough,
or you're a
right,
woman.
if you talk to enough Japanese women, you'll also find that there's some people that will dismiss whatever you have to say because you're a Japanese woman. So again, this is not saying
Yeah,
that every time you say something to the police, they're going to
yeah,
dismiss you. They're going to treat you, without courtesy. It's just saying that's what happened in this situation. Okay, so
yeah,
don't at me.
yeah. It was just it was just one officer out of a couple different officers who were there at
Right.
the time. It was just the one guy. So
After an
yeah, so
earthquake, by the way,
they
which
came.
is like, I mean, you don't have to be Albert
Yeah,
Einstein to put the pieces together. Oh, maybe there's an actual problem. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So they came, and they tried getting in touch with the apartment company, which they could not do.
Mm.
And they tried getting in touch with the gas company, which eventually I guess they were able to, and the gas was turned off.
Okay. Good job.
Yeah, good job. Gas was turned off. Yay. No explosions. Because I was having visions of, like people smoke in my apartment building, even though they're not supposed to. So I was having visions of somebody lighting up and,
Yeah.
gas is explosive. But my dad explained to me that if it was outside, the chances of that happening were actually quite low
Yeah.
because it's actually dispersed. It was like,
Right,
thanks,
right,
Dad.
right.
I know you're trying to help, but really it's not helping
It's
right
still
now.
not like you're a human being, and gas, like yeah,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be just hunky do. I mean, like I do kind of wonder like what your um the residents of that building were doing or thinking, because like um
So, yeah.
because that's
It,
gas. Like I mean like I don't imagine they're all so depressed about living in quote unquote the Naka that they're just like, yeah, I'm fine if things blow up. Like it is confounding, but please
well,
continue.
remember this was New Year's. So the
Uh,
only residents who were still in the apartment weren't the Japanese residents.
okay.
All the Japanese residents had left and gone home.
Mm, very interesting.
And so it was like me. Um, there's an apartment with some Chinese people. There's an apartment with a Vietnamese person. I think there's some Thai, and then there's an Indian family.
Mm,
And the woman, the Indian woman, she was so worried because she had no idea what was going on.
mm-hmm.
We were really the only ones around. So then Friday, now remember the earthquake happened on a Monday. Friday, my apartment company finally sent people from the Osaka office,
Mm-hmm.
which handles the Hokuriku region.
Mm-hmm.
So they show up on a Friday and proceeded to tell me that there were zero problems. There was nothing wrong. Everything was perfectly safe.
Mm-hmm.
When I pointed out there was a gas leak, they said, no, there was no gas leak. Like, I went to the police, the fire department came. There was clearly a gas leak.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to City Hall. And City Hall had been back at work since January 1st because there'd been an earthquake and, well, their vacation was now over, which, sucks, but unexpected emergency,
Right.
and showed them, yeah, I showed them the pictures I took and they're like, that doesn't look safe.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's a big apartment company and not like an individual apartment owner,
Mm-hmm.
they can't force them to do a safety inspection. They can only suggest it. So they called up and suggested it. And the next day, local apartment management walked around with only the Japanese residents of the apartment building. Now, again, not all apartments are like this,
Mm-hmm.
but myself and none of the other foreign residents were informed that this was taking
Mm-hmm.
place. And so, whether it was an oversight or not, I do not know. Um, and so the Japanese year, New Year's is a big holiday, right? So everything's
Mm-hmm.
closed. The first Monday, is it the first Monday is the coming of age day?
I'm not sure when
Um,
it is exactly, but it does happen in around that time. Yeah.
yeah. So this year it was the Monday after New Year's.
Right.
So everything again closed because it's a national holiday. So I called the head office of my apartment company on Tuesday, the 9th or 10th. So like a whole week after the earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to them and they had no idea that the building was even damaged. They had heard nothing from local management. They hadn't contacted them to tell them.
Mm,
They they were completely shocked.
yeah. This is
Um
a really wild response because, like, again, Japanese people are used to this. Like every Japanese person has lived through a big earthquake, and this just like I don't know, like the lack of like desire to do anything. It's just very confusing. Because like, like, okay, like, even allowing for like, okay, we don't trust women and minorities. Okay, that's still like somebody's property, right? That's still, somebody, a place somebody lives. So like, I don't know, like, it's just deeply confusing and deeply troubling why um there wasn't more proaction, like more a more pro is deeply confusing why there wasn't a more proactive attitude. um
Well, yeah, I think so. I think in my situation, because of my location, I think that's part of the reason. The news was not reporting it.
mhm,
So, so I live in the northern part of my city,
mhm,
right on the border. It was only the northern part that was affected.
mhm,
And so it basically wasn't mentioned on, oh yeah, city's fine. There's no problem. And so like when I went back to work and I showed my coworkers the pictures, they're like, "Wait, that's where you live?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they were like, "But we thought it was perfectly fine by you." And I'm like, "It's not." We had some collapsed roads and collapsed walls.
mm,
Obviously not as bad as up in Noto, but we still had damage.
okay.
But it wasn't reported.
Was the understanding that like the earthquake only affected the Noto Peninsula, like even in Ishikawa, like people in Ishikawa thought it only touched this one part?
Yeah, pretty much. So unless you actually lived in one of the other parts that was affected, nobody knew. And so, I mean, I was very lucky. I was able to stay in my apartment. I never had to leave my apartment. I never lost utilities.
Okay.
The things that broke, it was like plastic containers that fell
Mhm.
off. So I was very lucky.
Right. Because some people lost their entire homes. Like, obviously, there was loss of life. There was massive landslides in some areas. Some people actually did lose utilities, and, they were sent to
Oh yeah,
live in shelters. I think there's still people living in shelters. So,
yes.
yeah, this is a massive bullet that Emily was able to dodge.
There's been a lot of, because I'm in contact with people who live in the area, as well as there's a couple Facebook
Hmm.
groups, and we've been sharing, trying to get assistance, and it's things like there's still people in shelters,
Mm,
and the government had set up a program that they could apply to stay in hotels
hmm,
in unaffected areas,
hmm,
and these applications still haven't been processed for some people.
mm.
Like, I mean, people just got back their water the end of March, but
Huh.
now they're finding the pipes are cracked.
Mm,
So they restored the water, but the shaking had actually cracked pipes, and they didn't know until they restored the water service the other week that the pipes are cracked.
mm,
And so even though they got water back in some places, they have to now fix that problem. And so it's just one problem after another. Between There's been talk that the response for rescue was on the slower side,
mm.
and that the manpower put into it was smaller than for other earthquakes.
Right.
The Noto area is mainly elderly. So you've
Mm,
got the problem where they were elderly, and then it was New Year's, so a lot of the grandkids were up there. So you had a bunch of elderly and young people. Um, and so evacuating those people, it's very tricky because you have people who can't necessarily move fast,
right.
carry things, might not be able to walk, not because they're injured from the earthquake, but they just can't walk.
Mm,
And one of the things was more than a week, I think it might have been 2 weeks after the earthquake, some of the evacuation points hadn't been reached by rescue staff yet.
mm.
They sent in a drone.
Interesting.
Yeah, so like these evacuation points didn't have supplies coming in, didn't have medicine coming in. And so that led to, I guess in Japan it's called like a secondary disaster.
Mm,
So the secondary disaster issue was happening on top of the initial earthquake.
right. Like it makes me wonder if like the disdain for like the Inaka, and like anybody who's listening this far in probably has like already knows what Inaka is or has looked it up, but Inaka is just the Japanese word for countryside, which is practically speaking, countryside is just anything that's not the big city. So I wonder if like I wasn't thinking about the demographics of the area either, and like in the Inaka it does tend to be more elderly. It does tend to be lower on population size. And that makes me wonder if like this less than efficient response and just general, I don't know, like even just hearing about your apartment situation, like I don't know, like when March 11th happened and that was in Tokyo, and and you know Tokyo is the center of the universe, right? So um yeah, that's a thought.
I have heard multiple people express the same thoughts,
Mm,
both Japanese and even people who have never been to Japan just watching the news coverage.
uh
So before the earthquake, Noto was already struggling with depopulation plus aging population and like industries that they had kind of dying out
mm,
and relying on tourism to kind of bring in the money, except that there's no easy way to get there.
right.
So they were even struggling with getting the tourism.
Mm, mm, mm,
Um, and so it was already a place that was, it's not a financially sound area, I guess.
mm,
It doesn't bring in tax revenue.
mm.
So now people are like, should I even rebuild
Oh wow.
if there's no jobs up there? Yeah, there's people who are like, I'm not rebuilding. There's people who are debating on whether or not they should rebuild because, it's going to cost so much to rebuild, and they were barely making it as it was. The response was crazy. I remember watching one of the foreign news crews had come from, it was a foreign news crew, but they were in Tokyo. I guess they're stationed in Japan, but it's one of the, I don't think it's BBC or CNN, but it's one of those international news
Mm,
companies. And they had gone to, I think it was Regima. And one of the things they were saying is, where are the rescuers? Where's the response?
mm,
They're saying they can't get here, but we got here.
right.
If we were able like if we were able to get here with our camera equipment and not being specialists, what's the excuse for there not being a response?
Mm,
And so there was some international criticism from what I've heard from people in the States
mm.
who were checking in to see if I was okay because, I'm in the general area.
Generally speaking, like international criticism is something that will get Japan to move with the hotness on a given subject. But I didn't hear anything. That's just me though. I didn't hear anything. I did hear some grumbling from people in Japan. And I haven't I should have kept up more with it, but um like all this is like honestly it's just a little sad. Because like huh? No,
Sorry.
no, 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 no. I mean like it's not it's not your fault that the earthquake happened. It's just sad that there wasn't more care taken, I guess, for people out in one of my favorite places in Japan, like one of the most beautiful places in the country easily. Because like I love it out there.
I think it was a combination of factors. And so we can't really like point to one thing for the kind of sad response. Like, it was New
Mm-hmm.
Year's. So, admittedly, there wouldn't have been as many people readily available.
Right.
But on the other side of that coin is when there's a disaster, I'm sorry, vacation time is over,
Right.
you know?
And just a quick note, like if you're not familiar with Japanese culture, like the 1st of January is essentially like the Japanese Christmas. It's the family gathering season. It's the family gathering holiday. So you go back home to visit your folks and visit with your family. So that's so like imagine a huge earthquake or a huge calamity happening on Christmas somewhere in the West. And imagine how unprepared people are in general for a calamity to happen on, the major holiday in a given culture. So just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. So people weren't where they would normally be.
Right.
Not only people in Noto, but just like in general, like the rescue crews would have probably been mostly home, which may not be where they're
Mm,
stationed. Um, and then the other thing is the road situation, like the area it was
mm,
in is not an easy area to get to. So there's that. And then the demographics of the area. Besides, the depopulation means there's empty homes.
mm,
And so empty homes also
mm,
collapsed,
mm, mm, mm.
which causes all sorts of issues. So I think there were multiple factors that kind of piled on top of each other and just made it that much harder.
Right.
But I feel I wish the response had been better.
Absolutely.
But it's kind of hard, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but I mean, the aftershocks have now basically stopped.
Mm,
Um, for the most part, they're very small. Um, and people are getting water back. People have gone back to school, work. I know my good friend, her family lives up in Wakata Onsen, and they were at a house in Kanazawa for a while, but they're back up in Wakata Onsen as well.
mm.
So people are returning home who can.
Right.
So I mean that's good, but on the Japanese disaster response and recovery, it's taking longer than some other earthquakes that have
Mm,
happened.
mm, 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 mm. So like to change gears just a little bit, like did you have an emergency like an
Yeah.
earthquake pack?
No. Okay. I'm gonna say no, but okay. But let me explain.
Mhm.
So I don't have an actual pack, but I used to work in an outdoor store and camping. So I ski. I usually, although I didn't ski this year, and so I always have emergency food and emergency water in my
Mhm.
apartment. In my car with me, I always have food and drink.
Right.
And because I have a thyroid problem, yes, internet, I have a thyroid problem that requires daily thyroid medication. I actually keep a week's worth of medication in with my wallet.
Mhm.
So, do I have like a go bag? No, but do I have supplies that can easily be grabbed or are already in my car?
Mhm.
Yes. So, no earthquake emergency pack, but yes, supplies?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Like again, this isn't to pass judgment. It's just you know, it's just something that like this earthquake in particular was just such a strange earthquake. It
Yeah.
feels like we're looking at something potentially that we've never seen before. Like I'm glad the aftershocks have finally stopped and like just full disclosure, I don't have an emergency pack either, but listening to you talk about this is deeply inspired me to fix that because Japanese living domiciles are not exactly the largest, unless you got
Yeah.
like Scrooge McDuck money. But just thinking about um how bad can get, even in the
Yeah.
city, because like on March 11th I remember watching videos of like convenience stores being cleared out for days, if not weeks. So let this be a little reminder to everybody, if you're living in a earthquake prone area, to reconsider getting that emergency pack together, because I know it's definitely been a good reminder to me.
Yeah, no, it's good to have stuff put together. Like we had heavy snowfall back in, was it 2017?
Hmm.
There was a massive snowfall in the Ishikawa Fukui area, and Route 8, which is the main road, it goes basically the whole country, um shut down.
Mm.
And so they could not get supplies into Kanazawa. So even though like Kanazawa was basically fine, I mean the snow was up to my hip.
Hmm.
And that happened in like a 24 to 36-hour period. Water pipes froze and burst. So like people didn't have water. So the convenience stores quickly cleared out of
Hmm.
stuff. But because Route 8 wasn't running, new supplies couldn't get into the convenience stores. Ever since then, I've been more vigilant about making sure that I have some water and some easy to eat food lying around. Um, but the other thing with that is you have to make sure if you do have an emergency pack that it's up to date because the stuff in it expires. So if you do get one or if you make your own, just watch those dates and every year or so have an emergency food party. Like there's thing like you add the hot water to the camping pack and you have like stew or something. Have a
Right,
party.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of an investment in time, and not so much money, but like depending on what you decide to put in your pack. But yeah, definitely worth it. Again, especially if you're living in Japan, because that big earthquake could be around the corner for you. So take this, take this as a kind reminder, a friendly reminder to think forward a little bit, think about what could happen.
Yeah, the convenience stores by me this time didn't run out of supplies, so that was good.
That is good.
But I will say I did actually stop on the way from the coffee shop back to my apartment. I actually did panic stop at a convenience store, not my finest moment, and bought like multiple 2-liter bottles of drinks
Hmm.
and like potato chips and things that didn't need to be cooked or kept cold just in case there was no electricity.
Right. Like, well, yeah, yeah, when you're in a situation like that, like um like, I mean, during COVID in the US, like people were hoarding toilet paper and things. So maybe get some toilet paper while you're thinking about your emergency
Yeah.
pack. Like, yeah, that was frustrating because like I lived through 2020 in Japan, and not being able to reliably go to the drugstore and get toilet paper was a humbling experience, as
Yeah.
part of a first world country, or living in a first world country and being used to having certain things. Super duper first world problem, but it has to do with your poop. So, it's again very humbling first world problem. But yeah.
Yeah, that was some interesting shopping experiences that I had where they were limiting
Right.
how much you could buy. Masks were
Right.
limited. They started limiting toilet paper and paper towels by
Right.
me.
The worst with the toilet paper thing was like when you got to the drugstore and like there was like two left, and you see a little old lady or something
Yeah.
walking over towards it, and you're like, do I do I do the chivalrous thing, or do I get my fucking toilet paper?
you're like, yeah, I know, I hate it when that
Yeah.
happens. And you're like, oh, it happened with the masks a lot.
Yeah.
And you could tell which masks were the good ones because like there would be one box of those
Right.
masks. And then this other mask would just be like completely filled. And you're like, what's wrong with those
Right, right,
masks?
right,
Why aren't I buying those ones?
right.
Yeah.
When I do these, usually I have like a bunch of questions that I have locked and loaded in advance just in case, but this feels like it was a natural distillation of everything that I wanted to touch on, and I think that you wanted to touch on. So like in closing,
Yep.
like what's been on your mind, or how are you feeling? How's life? Are you gonna stay in each cover? Are you gonna move on, or just yeah?
Well, I am moving, but not because of the earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
Personal life changes. So I'm actually moving farther away. Um to a place that they basically didn't even feel this earthquake. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so but I will be staying in Japan and yeah, I mean I worry about earthquakes, but at the same time I'm trying not to stress myself
Mm-hmm.
out because I can't control if there's an
Right.
earthquake. Like, let's just be honest, I have no control over whether or not there's an
Right.
earthquake. And I had a rough couple of weeks or month where I was getting upset by everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would just start crying, or I was yelling at my parents on the phone at one point because I was really upset. And I was like, you're not listening to me.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're not here, so they don't know what's going on, and they're trying to give me
Right.
advice. So, yeah, no, I mean, I'm staying in Japan. I'm trying to be mellow about the whole earthquake
Okay.
situation.
Because like it did seem like you were having a little bit of a rough time. Like understandably, it looked like you were having a
Yeah,
rough time, and I was like genuinely, a little worried about you. And like I kind of wanted to have you on Earth.
sorry.
No, 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 no. I mean, like it's like again understandable. Like this was a major event, and like I kind of wanted to have you on earlier, um, just to check in and see if you were doing okay. So like it does seem like you're doing okay, like now. So
Yeah, no, no, now I'm doing okay, but January was not good. I
right.
I must say, as we all kind of sometimes will complain about online and how people react
Mm-hmm.
online, being able to vent and just type out what was happening was actually really helpful.
Mm.
I'm sure I annoyed plenty of people with my nonstop posting at that time,
I
but
think you're okay.
it was what I
Yeah.
needed. So, but no, my plans are to stay here and continue my life in Japan.
Well, that sounds good. Yeah, it sounds like you're already on the way to brighter days. So I'm genuinely glad that you're okay. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you for having me, Sam. It was great.
Thank you for listening to the Tokyo Tea Party podcast. Thanks to Emily for hopping on the mic with us today and sharing her experiences from the Noto Earthquake. Today's music, courtesy of TuneTank.com, Sunset Dance by Algani, and Rhythm of Havana, courtesy of Pineapple Music. Did you enjoy today's episode? Give this episode a like, share it with your friends, or leave a comment. If you find this podcast especially valuable, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Tokyo Tea Party Podcast, all one word. Thank you. I've been your host, Samuel Darbuz. Be easy, y'all. Mina, genki de ne. Peace!